She did not flinch when the woman grabbed her arm. That was the part nobody in the Whitmore Grand Hotel lobby seemed to understand. The security guard who had watched it happen. The concierge behind the marble desk who had stopped mid-sentence. The couple near the revolving doors with their matching luggage tags and their shocked, half-open mouths. None of them understood why the woman in the gray hoodie simply stood there, still and quiet, while the hotel manager's hand gripped her elbow and turned her toward the exit. Her name was Fatou Diallo. She was 43 years old. She was wearing a gray zip-up hoodie from a university she had never attended, bought at a thrift store on Bloor Street when she was 19 and couldn't afford the bus fare to her second job. She still wore it sometimes. Old habits. And she was carrying a canvas tote bag that had her daughter's crayon drawing ironed onto the front. A house with too many windows and a sun that took up half the sky. She had flown in from Vancouver that morning. She had a meeting at 9 o'clock the next day. The meeting was with the city's largest commercial real estate consortium, who were negotiating the sale of a property portfolio that, if the numbers aligned, would be the largest private acquisition in the province's history that quarter. The property that included this hotel. She did not say any of that when Renata Holloway, the hotel's general manager, told her the establishment was fully booked. She said, "I have a reservation." Renata said, "I'm afraid we don't have anything under that name." Fatou said, "Diallo, Diallo." There was a pause. The kind of pause that says something is being decided that has nothing to do with the computer screen the concierge was pretending to look at. "I'm sorry," Renata said. "Perhaps there was a mix-up with the booking system. We can recommend another property nearby." Fatou looked at her. She had learned, over the course of many years and many rooms like this one, how to look at a person in a way that gave nothing away. No anger, no surprise, no hurt. Just her eyes, level and still, waiting. "I'd like to speak with someone who can access the reservation directly," Fatou said. That was when Renata touched her arm. Not violently, not with any particular force. But there was something in the gesture. Fingers wrapping around an elbow, the body angled toward the door, the smile that had nothing behind it, that said everything words were too careful to say. "We can sort this out at the side desk," Renata said. "If you'll just let go of my arm," Fatou said. Her voice was quiet, not sharp, not raised. Just a simple instruction delivered with the same tone she used to sign off on quarterly reports. Renata released her arm. Something shifted in the lobby, some change in the air pressure, but nobody moved. The security guard stayed where he was. The couple near the doors looked away. The concierge found something very important to study on his screen. Fatou picked up her tote bag. She looked at Renata one more time. Then she walked to the side desk, sat down in the chair, and waited. She did not reach for her phone. She did not ask to speak to anyone else. She simply sat, with her canvas bag on her lap and her daughter's crayon sun stretched across the front of it, and let the silence do what silence does when it goes on longer than anyone expects. Renata Holloway had worked in hospitality for 16 years. She had a degree from Ryerson. She had managed 3 properties before the Whitmore Grand, each one larger than the last, each promotion confirming the story she told herself about the kind of professional she was. She was detail-oriented. She read the room. She protected the brand. She read the room now. She saw the gray hoodie. She saw the canvas bag. She saw the woman's unmanicured hands and the worn strap of her tote, and the absence of any luggage that looked like it belonged in a lobby with black marble floors and fresh orchids on every surface. She did not see the watch. It was a plain thing, minimalist, the kind that didn't announce itself. She did not see the slight capillus on Fatou's right index finger from years of writing code before the voice-to-text software got good enough to trust. She did not see any of the things that were true. She saw what she expected to see, and she moved on what she expected to be true. A junior staff member named Vincent was the one who finally accessed the reservation. He was 24, had been at the Whitmore Grand for 8 months, and had not yet learned to see the things Renata had trained herself to see. He typed in the name, and then he went very still. He looked at the screen. He looked at the woman sitting in the chair with the canvas tote bag. He looked at the screen again. The reservation was under Diallo. It had been confirmed for 3 nights. It was the founder's suite on the 14th floor, a space the hotel reserved for guests whose accounts carried a specific designation in the booking system. A small icon, barely visible, that the senior staff knew to look for, that marked accounts linked to the hotel's ownership infrastructure. Vincent did not fully understand what he was looking at, but he understood enough. He went to find Renata. In the 18 months since Fatou Diallo's technology holding company, Baobab Capital, had acquired a minority stake in the hospitality group that owned the Whitmore Grand along with 11 other properties across Canada, she had stayed at the hotel twice before. Both times she had come in through a side entrance with an assistant and a rolling suitcase. Both times she had been met in the lobby by the general manager of the day with a warmth that was indistinguishable from genuine pleasure. She had wondered, sometimes, what that warmth was made of, whether it would hold its shape if the suitcase were gone, if the assistant weren't there, if she were standing alone in a gray hoodie with a tote bag her 7-year-old daughter had decorated on a Sunday afternoon with Crayola markers and too much enthusiasm. She had her answer now. She was not surprised. She had stopped being surprised by this particular answer before she turned 30. What she felt instead was something quieter and more specific, the low, flat feeling of a thing confirmed. The way a doctor looks at a scan and recognizes the shape of what they already suspected. She sat in the chair and thought about her daughter. Adaora had asked her that morning, "Mama, why do you still have that bag?" She meant the tote. She was 7 and embarrassed by it, the way only a 7-year-old can be embarrassed, purely, completely, without apology. Fatou had said, "Because I love the picture on it." Adaora had made a face. "I drew that when I was 5. It's not even that good." "I think it's exactly that good," Fatou had said. She thought about that conversation now. She thought about what it meant to keep something that reminded you of where you had come from, even when where you were going had taken you so far ahead that the distance could make you dizzy. She had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Scarborough with her mother and her 2 brothers. Her mother had cleaned offices. Her brothers had shared a bed until she was old enough to sleep on the couch and give one of them hers. She had taught herself to code at the public library, sitting at the computer terminals after school until the librarian turned off the lights. She had built her first product at 23 at a folding table in her mother's kitchen. She had sold it at 27 for enough money that her mother had cried for an hour and then asked if they could please have chicken for dinner. She had not forgotten any of it. She did not want to. The gray hoodie was not a statement. She had not chosen it to make a point. She had put it on that morning because it was comfortable, and because she had packed quickly, and because she had not thought, not even for a moment, that she should dress differently to stand in a hotel lobby that was, in a quiet and indirect but entirely real sense, partly hers. She had not thought that, and so she had not dressed for it, and here she was. Vincent found Renata near the concierge desk. He spoke quietly. He kept his voice below the ambient sound of the lobby, the fountain near the entrance, the faint music overhead. But Renata's face was not quiet. It moved through several things in quick succession. Confusion first. Then a rapid, internal recalibration. Then something that looked almost like alarm, but was actually the specific feeling of understanding a mistake after it is too late to unmake it in the way you would have preferred. She turned to look at the side desk. Fatou was still sitting in the chair. She was not looking at her phone. She was looking out through the large windows at the street, at the late afternoon light on Bloor Street, at the people passing without particular urgency. Renata walked across the lobby. Her footsteps on the marble were very audible to her, and to no one else. "Mrs. Diallo," she said. Fatou looked at her. "I owe you a sincere apology. There was an error on our end and I mishandled the situation. Your suite is ready. I would very much like to make this right." Fatou said nothing for a moment. "Vincent," she said, "will you make sure my key cards are ready?" Vincent said, "Of course." She stood up. She put the tote bag over her shoulder. She did not look at Renata again right away. She looked at the room. The marble floors, the orchids, the couple near the door who were now pretending to study the art on the wall, the security guard who had found something very interesting to examine on his own hands. Then she looked at Renata. "Thank you," she said, and her voice was entirely, perfectly neutral. She followed Vincent to the elevator. The call came that evening from her assistant in Vancouver. Fatou was sitting in the founder's suite with room service she hadn't touched yet, reviewing acquisition documents on her laptop, when her phone buzzed with a message that said, simply, "Check your email. Board is asking questions." She checked her email. The message from her board liaison was 4 sentences long. The subject line was, "Whitmore situation. Someone in the lobby had taken a video. Not of the arm grab. That moment had been too quick, too quiet, not dramatic enough to pull out a phone for. But someone had filmed the minutes afterward. Fatou sitting in the chair with her canvas bag. Renata's body language as she stood near the concierge desk. The particular quality of the silence in that lobby. And then Vincent crossing the floor. And then Renata walking toward Fatou. And then the change in the room when Renata spoke. The video had been posted 2 hours ago. It had 60,000 views. The caption said, "She sat there and let them figure it out." Fatou read the board liaison's 4 sentences. Then she put her phone face down on the table and ate her room service. By 9 o'clock the next morning, before her meeting with the consortium, the video had 240,000 views. By the time she walked out of the meeting at noon, having signed the preliminary terms on the acquisition, it had passed 700,000. The consortium representatives had been formal and warm in the measured way that large sums of money make people formal and warm. One of them, a man named Clifford who wore a tie that was slightly too tight, had said, "We saw the news this morning," with an expression that suggested he was not entirely sure how to contextualize what he had seen. Fatou had said, "It was a long evening," and left it at that. Clifford had nodded, as though this were a profound observation. In the car back to the hotel, her assistant called. "The hospitality group's PR team has reached out," her assistant said. "They'd like to issue a joint statement." What would the joint statement say? They haven't specified, but they've also had 17 journalists request comment. Their main property's Instagram is about 40% negative sentiment this morning, and their flagship Whitmore Grand Toronto is trending locally. Fatou watched the city move past the car window. The autumn light on the buildings. A park she remembered from before she could afford to live near it. "Tell them I'll think about it," she said. What Renata Holloway had not known, what perhaps only 2 or 3 people in that lobby might have known if they had been watching the right kind of news. 3 weeks prior, Baobab Capital had moved from a minority stakeholder position to a majority position in the Whitmore Hospitality Group. The paperwork had been finalized on a Tuesday. There had been no press release yet. The public announcement was scheduled for the following month. This meant that on the afternoon Renata Holloway had placed her hand on Fatou Diallo's arm and steered her toward the side desk. Fatou Diallo was, in the most direct and legal sense available, her employer, not a shareholder, not a board member in the abstract governance sense. The majority stakeholder, the person at the top of the chain from which all decisions, including the decision to hire a general manager, ultimately descended. Renata had not known this. No one on staff at the Whitmore Grand Toronto had been notified yet. The communications plan was careful, sequenced, and had not yet reached that phase. None of that changed what it was. The hospitality group's CEO, a man named Harrison who had been in the industry for 22 years and had the particular polish of someone who had never had to apologize for anything he truly regretted, called Fatou at 2 o'clock that afternoon. He did not begin with an apology. He began with the phrase, "deeply regrettable situation," which Fatou noted was a construction that removed agency from all parties equally, including the party who had reached out and grabbed someone's arm. She let him finish. "Harrison," she said, "I have a question. Of course. How many properties in the group currently have active DEI training protocols for front-of-house staff?" A pause. We have an onboarding program that covers active, ongoing, not onboarding. Another pause. Longer this time. I would need to check with HR on the current. I think we should find out, she said. I'd like a full audit across all 12 properties by end of next week. Can you make that happen? Harrison said he could. His voice had the slightly careful quality of someone recalibrating what kind of conversation this was. And Harrison, she said, tell your PR team I won't be doing a joint statement. If the group wants to release something, that's the group's business. I have nothing to add. She hung up. The audit results came back in 10 days rather than 7. Fatou read them on a Wednesday morning in her home office in Vancouver, with her daughter at school and her second cup of coffee going cold beside her. Of the 12 properties, 4 had no active training program of any kind beyond the initial onboarding module. 3 had programs that had not been updated in more than 3 years. 1 property had a program that referenced legislation that had since been amended. She forwarded the results to her board liaison with a single line. This is the starting point. The response came back. Understood. How do you want to proceed? She thought about that for a while. She thought about Harrison's voice on the phone, the careful pivot, the word regrettable, and all the work that word was doing. She thought about Renata Holloway and the way she had moved through that lobby with the confidence of someone who had read the room correctly many times before and had never yet been asked to account for what she saw. She thought about Vincent, 24 years old, who had gone very still in front of his computer screen, who had gone to find Renata not because he was following procedure, but because something in him had recognized the shape of a wrong thing and had wanted to correct it. She had asked her assistant to note his name. She thought about her mother, who had cleaned offices in this city for 22 years, who had moved through lobbies like the Whitmore Grands with a mop and a cart and a key card that opened the service entrance, and who had been invisible in a way that was so complete and so consistent that it had become, for the people around her, simply the way things were. She thought about her daughter, about the crayon drawing, about the house with too many windows. She wrote back, we restructure the training programs at all 12 properties. Mandatory, ongoing, third-party facilitated. We build it into the management performance review process. And I want Vincent Singh promoted to assistant floor manager at the Toronto property, effective next month, if his performance reviews support it. She sent the email. She picked up her coffee, found it cold, and went to make another cup. Renata Holloway resigned 3 weeks later. The letter was brief and professional. Fatou did not read it until her assistant mentioned it in passing. The video had, by that point, accumulated just over 4 million views. The comments were what they always were in moments like this, a long, running conversation about what people recognized in it, what it reminded them of, what it confirmed or surprised them. Some people were angry in the satisfying way that resolves into nothing. Some people said things that were true and careful and hard-won. Some people wanted a sequel. Fatou did not read the comments. She had seen enough of them in the first 48 hours to understand what the video meant to the people watching it, and she was glad that it meant something. But the video was not the story, as far as she was concerned. The video was a Tuesday afternoon. The story was what came after. In November, 2 weeks before the official public announcement of Baobab Capital's majority stake in the Whitmore Group, Fatou flew back to Toronto for a property review meeting. She came in through the main entrance, the same revolving doors. She was wearing a different hoodie, navy this time, older, softer. She did not tell anyone she was coming. She had not asked for anyone to meet her. The lobby was the same, black marble, orchids. The faint music she hadn't noticed the first time, but noticed now. A different concierge at the desk, a young woman who looked up when the revolving door turned. Good morning, the young woman said. Welcome to the Whitmore Grand. Fatou said, Good morning. I have a reservation. Of course. Can I get your name? Diallo, the young woman typed. She found the reservation. She looked up with the same professional warmth she had offered before she knew anything. Mrs. Diallo, we have you in the founder's suite. Let me get your key cards ready. Fatou put her tote bag on the counter. The crayon sun faced upward. The young woman glanced at it for just a moment. Not with judgment, just the brief noticing of a thing, and then looked back at her screen. It was a small moment, so small it would not have made a video, so small it would not have trended anywhere or gathered any views. It was, to Fatou Diallo, the only moment that mattered. She took the key cards. She thanked the young woman. She rode the elevator up to the 14th floor, sat down in the quiet of the founder's suite, and called her daughter's school to confirm pickup time for the afternoon. Outside, the city moved through another ordinary morning, not knowing and not needing to know that something had shifted, slightly but permanently, in a lobby with black marble floors and fresh orchids on every surface. And for the first time since she'd landed in Toronto, Fatou let herself sit with it. Not the satisfaction of being recognized, not the relief of being right. Just the plain, particular feeling of having held still when it would have been easier to move, and having let the truth make its way, slowly and without her help, to exactly where it needed to be.